The axe stopped mid-swing. For 3 years, nothing had ever made Malachi Brooks pause his work. Not storms, not wild animals, not the occasional lost traveler who stumbled into his territory. The rule was simple. Swing until sundown. Speak to no one. Trust nothing that moved. But there they were. 2 small figures at the edge of his clearing. So still, they might have been carved from the same wood he'd been splitting. Native children, twins by the look of them, no older than 8. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with something that could have been dirt or dried tears. They watched him with eyes too old for their faces. The strange part wasn't that children had found him in the middle of nowhere. The strange part was what they carried. A leather pouch hung between them, each child gripping one side like their lives depended on it. Steam rose from whatever was inside, even though the morning air was cold enough to see breath. The pouch itself seemed wrong somehow. Too clean for children who looked like they'd been running for days. Too valuable for orphans with nothing. Malachi lowered his axe completely. In all his years of isolation, he'd never seen anything like the way these children looked at him. Not with fear, not with hope, with recognition, as if they'd been looking for him specifically. The girl stepped forward first, her brother's hand still locked with hers around that impossible pouch. When she spoke, her voice carried across the clearing like she was speaking to someone she'd known her whole life. "We know what you did to our father." The axe fell from Malachi's hands entirely, because he'd never seen these children before in his life, and he'd never hurt anyone's father. Had he? Malachi's throat felt like he'd swallowed sawdust. His massive frame, which could fell trees in minutes, suddenly felt unsteady. The children stood there watching him struggle with memories that felt both distant and sharp. "I don't know what you're talking about." His voice came out rougher than he intended. The boy spoke for the first time, his words cutting through the mountain air. The man with the scar on his neck, the one who screamed when you held him underwater. Malachi's hand flew to his throat, fingers tracing the thin white line that ran from ear to collarbone. A scar he'd told himself came from a falling branch years ago. A scar he'd trained himself to forget about. The children watched his unconscious movement with satisfaction, like they'd just proven something important. "You remember now," the girl said softly. "Good, because we need you to do it again." The words hit Malachi like a physical blow. Do it again. Kill someone else. The mountain clearing suddenly felt too small, the trees pressing in around him like the walls of a cell he'd tried so hard to escape. "I don't kill people anymore," he said, backing away from the children until his shoulders hit the rough bark of a pine tree. "That man, your father, it was different. It was—" He stopped, because he couldn't remember what it was. Only fragments. A struggle near a creek. Someone begging. The weight of a grown man going limp in his hands. The girl tilted her head, studying him with an expression far too calculating for a child. "You think it was justice, don't you? That our father deserved what you did to him?" Malachi's hands trembled. "If I killed him, then yes. He must have. He was trying to save us." The boy's voice cracked on the last word. "From the same man we're asking you to stop now." Before Malachi could process this, the sound of hooves echoed through the trees. Both children tensed, their knuckles white around that mysterious steaming pouch. They moved as one, pressing themselves against the nearest tree trunk and becoming almost invisible in the shadows. A rider emerged from the forest trail, his horse picking its way carefully through the underbrush. Sterling Maddox. Malachi recognized the merchant's polished boots and silver-trimmed saddle before he saw the man's face. What Sterling was doing this far up the mountain, this far from his usual trading routes, sent ice through Malachi's veins. "Brooks," Sterling called out, his voice carrying that practiced friendliness that never reached his eyes. "Didn't expect to find you up here. Though I suppose a man can chop wood anywhere, can't he?" Malachi glanced toward where the children had hidden, but they'd vanished completely. Only the faint smell of whatever was in that pouch lingered in the air, something like herbs and smoke. "What do you want, Maddox?" Sterling dismounted, his movements too casual for a man who'd just ridden for hours through difficult terrain. "Looking for some lost property. 2 native children. Twins. You wouldn't have seen them, would you?" The lie came easier than breathing. "No. Shame." Sterling's smile widened. "They've got something that belongs to me. Something their father stole before he died. Something worth a considerable amount of money to the right buyer." In the silence that followed, Malachi heard it. A soft whisper from the shadows where the children were hiding. Just 2 words. Barely audible. "He's here." Malachi's mind raced as Sterling approached, his boots crunching on wood chips. The merchant's eyes swept the clearing methodically, like a man who'd tracked animals before. Professional, calculating. You seem nervous, Brooks. That's not like you. Sterling pulled a piece of paper from his jacket. I've got a legal claim here. Those children are wards of my trading company now. Their father signed them over before his unfortunate accident. The word accident hit Malachi like a punch, because it hadn't been an accident. He could feel the memory trying to surface, fighting against years of deliberate forgetting. Water. Struggling. A man's desperate voice saying something about protecting his children. Even if that were true, Malachi said carefully, I told you I haven't seen them. Sterling's smile turned predatory. The thing is, Brooks, I know they came this way. I've been tracking them for 3 days. Their little footprints stop right here, at your clearing. Now either they sprouted wings and flew away, or you're lying to me. From somewhere in the forest came the soft crack of a breaking twig. Sterling's head snapped toward the sound, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. But Malachi was already moving. Years of swinging an axe had given him reflexes most men couldn't match. His massive hand clamped down on Sterling's wrist before the gun cleared leather. I wouldn't, Malachi said quietly. Sterling's eyes went wide, but not with fear, with recognition. That's how you did it, isn't it? That's how you killed their father. Got close enough that he couldn't draw his weapon. The accusation hung in the air between them, because Sterling was right. The memory was coming back now, piece by terrible piece. A creak at night, a man reaching for his gun, Malachi's hands moving faster, stronger, ending the threat before it could develop. But why? What had driven him to violence that night? He was going to sell them, Malachi said, the words coming from somewhere deep in his buried conscience. Their father was going to sell his own children to you. Sterling's laughter was like broken glass. Sell them? Oh, Brooks, you understand nothing. Their father didn't want to sell them. He wanted to hide them. From me. From what they carry. Sterling gestured toward the trees where the children were concealed. That pouch they're clutching so desperately. It contains the location of a silver mine their tribe has been hiding for generations. Worth more money than you've seen in 10 lifetimes. The forest had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Their father died trying to keep that secret, Sterling continued. And you helped me by removing the only man who could have stopped me from taking it. Those children are going to lead me right to that mine, whether they want to or not. Somewhere in the shadows, a small voice whispered 2 words that changed everything. Not anymore. The children stepped out of the shadows together. That mysterious pouch still gripped between them. Their faces showed no fear, only a terrible determination that made them look far older than their years. Sterling's hand moved toward his gun again. But Malachi's grip tightened on his wrist until the merchant winced. Let me go, Brooks. This doesn't concern you anymore. Wrong. The girl's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. It concerns him more than anyone. She looked directly at Malachi, and in her eyes he saw something that made his stomach drop. Forgiveness. Understanding. As if she knew exactly why he'd killed her father and didn't blame him for it. Our father made you promise something that night, she continued. Before he died. Before you put him in the creek to make it look like an accident. Do you remember what you promised him? The memory hit Malachi like a landslide. A dying man's whispered words. Take care of them. Don't let Sterling get what he wants, promise me. I promise to protect you, Malachi said, the words feeling strange in his mouth after 3 years of silence. Sterling laughed harshly. Protect them? You murdered their father. What kind of protection is that? The kind that was necessary. The boy spoke for the first time since Sterling's arrival. Our father was dying anyway. The sickness in his lungs. He knew he couldn't run much longer. Couldn't keep us safe. So he made a choice. The children exchanged a look that spoke of shared secrets and desperate plans. Then the girl did something that made both men freeze. She opened the leather pouch. Inside wasn't a map or documents like Sterling expected. It was ash. Fine, gray ash that had once been something precious. Now scattered to the wind by the girl's deliberate motion. The mine information burned 3 days ago, she said calmly. The night our father died. This is what's left of everything Sterling wanted. Sterling's face turned purple with rage. You little savage. Do you have any idea what you've done? That mine could have made us all rich. It would have destroyed our people, the boy replied. Just like it destroyed our father when he found it. Sterling yanked his arm free from Malachi's grip. this time succeeding in drawing his pistol. But instead of pointing it at the children, he aimed it directly at Malachi's chest. Here's what's going to happen. Those children are coming with me. I'll get that information out of them one way or another. And you, Brooks, are going to let them go. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows about the night you drowned Jacob Running Bear in Willow Creek. The name hit Malachi like physical pain. Jacob Running Bear, the children's father, the man whose last words had changed everything. Sterling's smile was victorious. That's right. I know his real name. I know where his body is. And I know there are people who'd pay good money to hear about the white man who murdered him. In the growing silence, Malachi heard his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. One choice: protect his secret or protect the children. There was no middle ground. The gun barrel gleamed in the afternoon light, steady as Sterling's breathing. Malachi could see the man's finger resting on the trigger, ready to end everything with a simple squeeze. Behind Sterling, the children stood frozen, their empty pouch hanging useless between them. 3 years of careful isolation, 3 years of trying to forget Jacob Running Bear's final words, and now it all came down to this moment. Sterling's ultimatum echoed in the mountain air like a death sentence. Choose quickly, Brooks, your secret or their lives, but you can't have both. Malachi's eyes met the girls across the clearing. In them he saw something that broke his heart and gave him strength at the same time. Trust. Complete, absolute trust that he would do the right thing, even if it destroyed him. You know what's funny about secrets, Sterling? Malachi's voice was steady despite the gun pointed at his chest. They only have power if you're afraid of them getting out. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Everyone's afraid of something, Brooks. Even giants like you. Maybe. Malachi took a step forward, and Sterling's grip tightened on the pistol. But I'm more afraid of breaking a promise to a dying man than I am of you. Without warning, Malachi lunged sideways, putting himself between Sterling and the children. The gun boomed across the clearing, echoing off the mountain walls. Pain bloomed along Malachi's left shoulder as the bullet grazed him, but he kept moving. His massive hands caught Sterling around the throat before the merchant could fire again. "Run!" Malachi shouted to the children, but they didn't move. Instead, the girl did something unexpected. She began to speak in her native language, loud enough for her voice to carry through the trees. Sterling's eyes went wide with panic as her words echoed across the mountainside. "Shut her up," he gasped, struggling against Malachi's grip. "She's calling them. She's calling the others." Before Malachi could process what Sterling meant, the sound of horses reached them through the forest. Not one horse, but several, moving fast through the undergrowth, branches snapping under their hooves. Sterling renewed his struggling, desperation replacing calculation in his movements. "You don't understand, Brooks. This was never just about the mine. There are others involved, important people, people who won't let this stand." The riders burst into the clearing from 3 different directions, surrounding them completely. But these weren't Sterling's men. These were native warriors, faces painted for battle, weapons ready. Their leader was a woman in her 40s, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes burning with controlled fury. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Jacob Running Bear was my brother." The words hit the clearing like thunder. She looked directly at Malachi, still holding Sterling by the throat. "And these children are my responsibility now." Sterling made one last desperate attempt to reach his gun, but the woman moved faster than seemed possible. Her knife found its way to his throat before he could even cry out. "You killed my brother for these children," she said to Malachi. Now proved that his death meant something. Sterling's face had gone white as bone, the knife at his throat drawing a thin line of blood. The woman holding it studied Malachi with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Behind her, the mounted warriors waited in perfect silence, their horses pawing the ground restlessly. "My name is Ayanna Running Bear," she said, without taking the blade away from Sterling's neck. "These are my brother's children, and you are the man who gave him the death he asked for." Malachi's shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, but he ignored the pain. He was dying anyway, the sickness in his lungs. He couldn't run anymore, couldn't protect them from Sterling's men. "I know." Ayanna's voice carried no anger, only a deep sadness. "Jacob sent word to me before he died. Told me about the white man who promised to guard his children. Told me you were the only one he trusted to do what was necessary." Sterling tried to speak, but Ayanna pressed the knife deeper, silencing him. "Jacob also told me about the mine. About how Sterling's people have been hunting our family for months, trying to force us to reveal its location. She glanced at the empty pouch on the ground. But my brother was cleverer than they knew. The real information was never in that bag. The children moved closer to their aunt, and Malachi noticed something he'd missed before. The girl's necklace. A simple leather cord with a small metal pendant that caught the light in an unusual way. Not silver, not gold, something else entirely. The mine isn't just silver, Ayanna continued, following his gaze. It's much more valuable than that. The kind of metal that powerful men in distant cities would kill for. The kind that could change the balance of power if it fell into the wrong hands. Sterling made a desperate sound against the knife, his eyes bulging with the effort to speak. Ayanna loosened her grip just enough to let him talk. "You're making a mistake," he gasped. "This isn't just about me. There are men in Washington who know about this mine. Government men, military men. They won't stop just because you kill me." He's right. The admission came from one of the mounted warriors, a young man whose face bore a striking resemblance to the children. "We've been tracking his communications for weeks. Sterling's been sending reports to someone high up in the territorial government, someone with the authority to send federal troops if necessary." Malachi felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders like a landslide. This wasn't just about protecting two children anymore. This was about preventing a war. Because if the government decided that mine was worth taking by force, nothing would stop them from destroying the entire tribe to get it. "There's something else," the girl said quietly, her small hand touching the pendant at her throat. "Something Sterling doesn't know. Something even Jacob didn't know when he died." She looked up at Malachi with those two old eyes. "The mine's location isn't just hidden, it's protected. By people who've been guarding it for longer than any of us have been alive. People who don't take kindly to strangers." The forest around them seemed to grow darker, shadows lengthening as clouds passed over the sun. Somewhere in the distance, Malachi could swear he heard the sound of more horses approaching. A lot more horses. The sound of approaching horses grew louder, and through the trees came the distinctive blue uniforms of federal cavalry. At least 20 soldiers, led by a captain whose face was grim with determination. Ayanna cursed under her breath in her native language and pressed the knife deeper into Sterling's throat. "He told them where to find us," she said to Malachi. This was always his backup plan. Sterling managed a bloody smile despite the blade at his neck. "Did you really think I'd come up here alone? Captain Morrison has orders to secure the mine location by any means necessary. This land is about to become federal property whether you like it or not." The cavalry captain rode into the clearing and surveyed the scene with professional calm. His eyes took in the native warriors, the knife at Sterling's throat, and Malachi's bloodied shoulder before settling on the children. "I'm Captain James Morrison, United States Army. Mr. Sterling, are you injured?" "Nothing serious," Sterling gasped. "But these savages have been holding federal land illegally and threatening a government contractor. I demand their immediate arrest." Captain Morrison dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his saber hilt. "The thing is, Mr. Sterling, we've been investigating your reports for weeks now, and we've discovered some interesting discrepancies in your story." Sterling's confident expression faltered. "What kind of discrepancies?" "The kind that suggest you've been operating outside your authority. The kind that indicate you murdered Jacob Running Bear to steal information about mineral rights that don't belong to you." Morrison pulled a folded document from his jacket. "This is a federal warrant for your arrest, Sterling, on charges of murder, fraud, and unauthorized mining operations on protected tribal land." The knife at Sterling's throat trembled in Ayanna's grip. "Protected tribal land?" "That's right. The territory these children's father died protecting was designated as a federal reservation 3 months ago. Any mining operations here require direct approval from Washington, which you never sought to obtain." Morrison's eyes moved to Malachi. "We also know about you, Mr. Brooks. We know what you did to Jacob Running Bear, and we know why you did it." Malachi tensed, expecting handcuffs or worse. Instead, Captain Morrison did something unexpected. He saluted. "Jacob Running Bear was working as a federal informant, helping us track Sterling's illegal operations. His final report, sent the night before he died, contained a full confession of what he'd asked you to do and why. You carried out the lawful execution of a federal agent's final orders." The clearing fell silent except for the sound of horses breathing and leather creaking. Malachi felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Everything he'd believed about that night, everything he'd carried as guilt, suddenly took on a different meaning. That's impossible, Sterling snarled. Jacob Running Bear was just another savage trying to hide his people's resources from civilization. Jacob Running Bear was a decorated war veteran who served with distinction in the territorial conflicts, Morrison replied coldly. He volunteered to infiltrate your operation when we learned about your illegal mining activities. His sacrifice saved his people and served his country. Ayanna slowly withdrew the knife from Sterling's throat. My brother never told us. He died keeping his real mission secret to protect us all. Captain Morrison nodded to his men, who moved forward to arrest Sterling. The mine information was never meant to fall into private hands. The federal government will honor the tribal claims to this land and ensure the resources are managed properly. As Sterling was dragged away in chains, he screamed one final threat. This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. There are people in Washington who will never let this stand. But his words echoed empty across the mountain clearing, the desperate rantings of a man whose greed had finally caught up with him. 3 weeks later, Malachi stood in the same clearing where everything had changed, but now it looked different. The federal engineers had come and gone, surveying the land and marking boundaries that would protect it forever. The mine, with its precious deposits of rare earth metals needed for new telegraphic equipment, would remain under tribal control with government oversight. Sterling's scheme to steal it for private profit had died with his arrest. Captain Morrison had stayed long enough to explain everything. Jacob Running Bear had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment imaginable, pretending to betray his own people, while gathering evidence against Sterling's network. His final request to Malachi hadn't been the desperate plea of a dying father, but the calculated order of a federal agent, ensuring his mission's success, even at the cost of his own life. The weight Malachi had carried for 3 years, the guilt that had driven him into isolation, had been transformed into something else entirely. Pride, honor, the knowledge that he'd served justice even when he didn't understand it. The children, Ayanna and Coda, visited him regularly now. Their aunt had decided they needed to understand the full truth about their father's sacrifice, and Malachi had become an unexpected part of that story. Today they'd brought something with them. A letter. It's from our father, Ayanna said, holding out the worn paper. Aunt Ayanna found it in his belongings. It's addressed to you. Malachi's massive hands shook slightly as he unfolded the letter. Jacob's handwriting was careful, deliberate, the words of a man who knew he might not live to speak them aloud. To the giant, who keeps his promises. If you are reading this, then my children are safe, and my mission is complete. You gave me the death I needed and the peace I could not find any other way. But more than that, you gave my children a guardian when they needed one most. The mountain has been your prison for too long. It's time to come down and live among people again. My children will need someone to teach them about the world beyond our reservation. Someone strong enough to protect them, wise enough to guide them, and honorable enough to help them understand that not all outsiders are enemies. If you will have them, they would be honored to call you family. Malachi looked up from the letter to find both children watching him expectantly. Behind them, the sound of wagon wheels announced another visitor. Ayanna Running Bear rode into the clearing, but this time she wasn't alone. A woman in a simple blue dress sat beside her, someone Malachi recognized as Cora Lane from the Valley Settlement. Mr. Brooks, Cora said with a warm smile, I understand you might be looking for work. The Territorial School Board needs a man to teach practical skills to the children. Carpentry, wilderness survival, that sort of thing. The pay isn't much, but it comes with a house in town and the respect of the community. Malachi folded Jacob's letter carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. He looked around the clearing one last time, at the place where he'd hidden from the world and from himself. Then he looked at the children who had given him back his purpose, and the people who were offering him a future. When do I start? If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable Western tale where courage and destiny collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.